Hey guys, this is Anthony Morganti. I am MrPhotographer.com. Today in Photo Critiques, we're going to take a look at the work of Arie Gold. Arie's portfolio was chosen at random from at least 100 different portfolios I've received over the last few weeks from different photographers. If you'd like for me to possibly critique your images, in the description below this video will be all the information that you need. Now, Arie sent me 10 images. One of the images was taken with a Samsung phone. The other 9 images were taken with a Sony a7 III and different Sony glass. Now, let's just jump right into it and take a look at this image. This is really kind of a study of light, right? We have just stark white and black, or light and dark. We have the coffee cup, the saucer, the tabletop, which is black and white, the background, which is really black, and then we have the sugar going into the cup, and the way it's lit obliquely with the light to the side, casting a pretty significant shadow on the left side of the cup, and most of the spoon is in shadow as well. This is really kind of a shot many of us might take as we're working through what I call the photographer's 3 phases of growth. I've written about this several times. As a matter of fact, on my website, I'll have linked in the description below this video to this article where I talk about the phases of growth. Phase 1 is the technician. This is when you first get your camera, you're learning photography, and mainly you're just learning how your camera works. You're learning what aperture is and how it works on your camera, shutter speed, ISO, things like that, your menu system, different things. So you're like in the technician phase. Then you'll graduate to the craftsman phase. And this is something like Arie's doing now, where you're doing these kind of cliche shots, but they definitely teach you photography. It's a required phase. There's nothing to be ashamed of to be in this phase. Many great photographers never leave this phase. Maybe some of the best wedding photographers, for example, are still in the craftsman phase, but they're the best in the world. So there's nothing wrong with staying in this phase. It could make you a great living if you want to be a professional photographer, but you're mainly doing shots that have been done before, you know, like dropping the strawberry in the milk or taking this oblique lit shot, kind of a study of light, things like that. So it's a fine shot. The only thing I could suggest specifically about this specific shot is the cup has writing on it, and the writing is rather difficult to read in that it's really bright on this side of the cup, dark on this side of the cup. And whenever there's writing in an image, the person looking at the image usually wants to read what is written. So if the photographer makes it difficult for the viewer to read any writing in their photo, the viewer of the photo won't feel as fulfilled or pleased looking at the image. So what I would suggest is, if Arie does this shot over, if anyone else wants to try a shot like this, is to keep it starkly black and white and have a perfectly white porcelain cup and saucer with no writing on it at all. That will be a very graphic study of light and shadow, and you won't have the writing kind of dominating and distracting from what you're actually trying to do, is show this kind of unique or different oblique lighting. So that's, you know, just my critique of this single image is just the writing is distracting on the cup, so, and the saucer a little bit as well. So get rid of that. Also, I should just add, I'll have a link to this article in the description below this video, and phase 3 is the artist, and we'll talk about that some other time. Now, so it's a nice shot. Now, this one is similar. It's kind of a study of light and shadow, right? So we have the coffee cup and the saucer over here on the left. Now, see how this one has no writing to distract us. So we're really just absorbed into the image. And I think this is a better study of light and shadow than the first image, because this one doesn't have that writing there. Now, what it does have is this kind of crease between the pieces of paper. So what you may want to do is in post, just clone that out so that that isn't there. The various kind of gradation of shadow on the white, let's call it a tablecloth, right? It isn't a tablecloth, it's paper. But on the white paper, that's fine. I think that kind of adds to the study of the light. So I think that's fine. I would just recommend cloning out that line that is there, that seam or crease. This shot is really interesting. I like this shot. There's a lot of kind of a juxtaposition here. You have the vendor over here selling his wares. You have a lot of his wares all around him that he's selling, but it's kind of in an odd spot. You have a soldier up here with a gun, pointing the gun towards the photographer, which is a little bit unnerving. So it's really a very, very interesting shot. A lot of great color. This is considered an opaque shot, and what that means in the photography world is it's a flat shot, meaning there's not a lot of depth to it. Everything is in the same plane. That's fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. That's just what this would be classified as, whereas the opposite of an opaque shot is a transparent shot, where that type of image has a lot of depth to it. It has foreground elements, midground elements, background elements. Two different types of shots, two different ways you could approach something. Let's put it that way. So you could come in and approach something. Whether or not you could have got a more transparent type shot with this scene, I'm not sure. I wasn't there, but it works very well as an opaque shot, especially just the way both of the men in the image are looking towards the photographer. So I kind of like that as well, but they're so very different. All right. The men are very different, and the colors are very nice as well. One thing I'll just mention real quick, I mentioned this in other videos as well, and maybe someday I'll go into real depth on this. I'm just going to touch the surface of this. When a painter wants to paint a scene, they start out with a blank canvas and they add things to it. A photographer, on the other hand, they start out with the messiness of the world, and they have to select what is in their canvas or in their frame. And their frame is called the depictive space. What are they depicting? What are they going to be allowed to be depicted in that limited space they have of the camera frame? And there's different transformative elements that come into play when a photographer is choosing what to depict in the frame. There's vantage point. Do they want to be up high or down low, or do they want to be more to the side or the other side? So vantage point. The other thing is the frame itself. I mentioned that you have this opaque and transparent in the frame, so that's part of that, called the frame. So whether you want a flatter image that's opaque, or if you want a more airy image that's more transparent, that's the frame. The other is the moment of exposure. That obviously is right when you click the shutter. When are you clicking it? In this case, the moment of exposure was perfect. Both men are kind of looking towards the photographer. Going along with moment of exposure, though, is the shutter speed. Do you want a real fast shutter speed? Does the picture need it? For example, if someone's shooting a raptor, flying through the air at top speed, they're going to need a fast shutter speed, right? If, on the other hand, they want to display motion, then they'll use a slower speed so it's blurred. Like many times you see like city scenes where streetcars or subways underground are moving, right? So they want to show the motion, so they use a slow shutter speed. So all that has to do with the moment of exposure. The other one is the plane of focus. Do you want like a lot of plane of focus or limited plane of focus? And all of this controls what's called all the things, the choices you make for the depictive space or the depictive elements control the viewer's mental space. So you could really get in the head of the viewer by the way you control these things in your frame by vantage point, frame, moment of exposure, and plane of focus. So, for example, if you have something in the frame, let's say you're taking a portrait and you use a very small aperture, f/22. So the person's in focus, the back of their head's in focus, the buildings behind them are in focus. So someone looks at it, they'll look at everything, right? But if you use, let's say, f/1.4, so their eyes are in focus, but the tip of the nose is out of focus, their ears are out of focus, you're forcing the viewer, and those buildings in the background, I should say, are really out of focus. You're forcing the viewer to look at the subject's eyes. So you're controlling the mental space of the person viewing it. So all the choices you make for the depictive space control the mental space of the viewer. And I think Arie did a great job on this shot. This is a really, really nice shot. I just love, also there's kind of a diagonal going through here because the soldier's up high, the vendor's down low, and you kind of have that diagonal going through there as well. So it's a really well-composed image, very well done. This here, it's just two men walking. All right, kind of interesting. The only thing I say here is going back to that technician phase where you're learning your camera. This was shot at f/1.4. Now it was, even at that wide aperture, it was ISO at 1250. It was a 1/200th shutter speed, and you really needed that, at least that shutter speed, because the men are moving, unless you wanted to depict some kind of blur of their movement. So what I would say, because this guy in the foreground here is pretty blurry, the background's in focus. This man over here is actually slightly blurry because you're at f/1.4. So I suspect you might have focused on the background. Here I would say you'd have to stop down more, at least f/5.6. You might be able to get f/4, but just to get the men more in focus. Now this image is somewhere between opaque and transparent in that there's not a lot of depth of field here, but there is more depth of field here. Or let's say you use f/1.4 and you focus just on him, so the other elements behind him fall more out of focus. So you're kind of controlling where I look. I would look at people will tend to look at things that are in focus and not look at things that are out of focus, at least when they first look at an image. And then even if they start looking around, their eyes will come back to and dwell on that is in focus. So if you just used f/1.4 and just focused on this man in the foreground, everyone else in that background would be more out of focus compared to him, and my eyes would tend to look at him. Now, shooting with that A7 III Sony camera, you crop this as well. I think it might be too tight of a crop, just a little bit. I know it looks okay. You kind of have this guy close to this edge, this guy close to that edge. But I just would like a little more breathing space, I think, on the outside on this one. This is, again, kind of one of those shots where when you're in that craftsman phase, where you're just doing different, I'm going to call it cliche, and I don't mean that in an insulting way. It's just shots that were done like this, like 1,000 times. As a matter of fact, very recently I stumbled across a photo of my wife and I when we were dating, when we were like 18 years old, and I took a ghost image, I called it, of us sitting on the couch. And, it's just a phase you go through because you're learning how to do these kind of double exposure type things. And, it's fine, but it's kind of required almost that you have to kind of learn these cliche images because they teach you things about shutter speed, about aperture, about ISO in some instances, about how to do a double exposure and things like that. So, it's fine. Nothing wrong with that. This is like a pure art shot, I consider it, and it's not something I'd even critique because this is, when it comes to art, that's really up to the artist and the mind of the artist, but it's well done. I like the diagonal lines, the kind of the blur going diagonally. That's a nice compositional element, so that's well done. This here, again, it's kind of opaque. There's not a lot of depth of field here. We do have some foreground elements, so it's a little more transparent than that image I showed of the soldier and the vendor. But it's one where I had mentioned before, it doesn't have a strong subject. Yes, it's kind of a dilapidated, blown out building. You got some girders and things, and it's old. That could be considered like the subject, but it's not really a strong subject. You need something else in here for my eyes to kind of rest on. It could be as simple as a little bird sitting on a girder here, which, you know, again, as I said before, it's very possible when you took this image, there were no birds within 5 miles of this location, but it needs that other element. And you as a photographer, having control over what's in the depictive space, it's up to you to find something in this scene, work the scene to find that subject, that thing that my eyes will resolve on, and that will help the image. This is kind of a cool study too of just, you know, contrast. We have, you know, just the real green, there's a yellow in there, and then we have this kind of white coming through, and I like it. I like this shot and the reflection. I think it's a cool shot. Again, I think this is a little more art maybe than photography, but I think it's really cool. Very well done. This is the shot taken with the Samsung phone. This is very kind of almost dreamy, you know, dreamscape. I like it. I don't care for this kind of haloing in the processing. I know it was taken with a phone, but you see this haloing all through here. That to me is distracting, and I will confess, because I'm so into post-processing, I teach photography and I mainly teach post-processing, is that I'm more sensitive to something like this. The average person might not care, but that haloing does bother me, and I would try to avoid that. And again, if you ever want to print this, it would be more obvious in the print than it even is on looking on a computer screen. Also, there's like these kind of weird lines out in here. I don't know if that's from editing or if that's just the way the sky was, but that could be a little bit of a distraction too. You can see like there's almost like an edit line there, like something was removed. See this edge here? Like right there, like a branch went down maybe, or something like that. So that's kind of distracting. There's kind of a cool thing there. It almost looks like an angel wing right there. So that's kind of interesting. But it's an interesting shot. It's just the processing, I think, needs to maybe be looked at a little more closely. This I consider another art shot. Another one where you're kind of in that craftsman phase where you do kind of like depth study. So you have it almost looks like rope grading in front. And it's in focus, and of course the person behind it is out of focus. So it kind of just shows that depth and whatever. Again, this is maybe something you could work the scene, try it a different way. Whenever I do anything like this, I'll shoot it both ways, in that I'd shoot this shot, then I'd shoot with a shot of the person in focus and let that grading, let's call it a grading, go out of focus. I'll try it like that, see what it looks like. So I'll try it a lot of different ways and just kind of work the scene. So I think that's everything. Again, that's all 10 from Arie. Thank you very much for sending them in. I'd like to thank everyone for being so enthusiastic about this series, sending me so many images. I think my Dropbox is almost full. So what I'm going to do is, if my Dropbox does get full, there's going to be an automated email. When you do email me about critiquing your images, you may get shut down just temporarily until I get my Dropbox emptied out a little more, because you won't be able to upload them to my Dropbox if it's full. So, but that's just a possibility. It's not a definite. Still, in the description below this video, there'll be instructions on how you could send me images. Basically, you just email me, and then I set up a Dropbox folder for you to put those images in, and then I pick a portfolio at random, and the videos will be done either on Thursday or Friday of every week, and one video a week. So obviously I can't do everyone's portfolio, so I hope you understand. I think that's everything I wanted to talk about Arie's images. Very, very well done. Thank you for sharing them again, Arie. I do appreciate it. And thank everyone for watching my videos. I really do appreciate it. I'll talk to you guys soon.